Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Women in Recruitment's Friday webinar. We're delighted to welcome today Tara Ricks, who has been a highly successful female role model in the industry. I think Tara, like me, you've probably got quite a few years under your belt of extensive experience operating at board level on both an international and a national level. So it's really great to have you here today. You're going to be talking to us about the concept of resilience and how important that is going into the post-COVID world. So thank you for sharing that with us. To the audience, we'll be taking questions via the chat box, so please do, as Tara's talking, fill your questions through. We'll try and take opportunities during the session to ask Tara questions as she goes. Anything we don't cover, we'll fit in at the end, and hopefully we'll be able to address everything that you'd like to hear her advice and feedback on. So that's through the chat box. And Tara, welcome, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. I think, yes, we're both commonly known as veterans, I think, of the industry. Just to kindly put it. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all having a really productive week. Hopefully another week where you haven't yet contracted Zoom neck. And now I can help you move nicely through Friday afternoon and into the weekend. Can I also echo Natasha's comments reusing the chat box? It's open, it's free to use. And we'll all benefit much more from today if we're in an interactive space. So we've had some hugely welcome and positive bits of news today and this week, haven't we? The UK's COVID-19 alert level has been reduced from 4 to 3, which will certainly propel the easing of restrictions, which is a great thing. The Bank of England has revealed that there's growing evidence that the pandemic impact on output will be less severe than initially thought. And football's back, if that's your thing. I mean, personally, I'll be happier when hairdressers are back, but that's just me. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in the recruitment sector for over 25 years. I mean, to be fair, it's closer to 30 than 25, but I think psychologically I'm happier saying over 25 years in recruitment. And that's within startups, SMEs, and huge corporate beasts. And I've been involved in selling recruitment businesses, making acquisitions, MBOs, and I currently operate as a non-exec director or strategic board advisor or executive coach to several companies in the sector. I also work with Elite Leaders, which is a group of recruitment business owner peers, and we provide networking forums along with advisory and development input. So as a rule, I wouldn't usually turn to Mike Tyson for words of wisdom, but I have to quote him now. I'm sure some of you will be aware he very famously said, "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face." And I don't know about you, but I think that actually really acts well, almost as a metaphor for COVID-19. I really can't imagine that many of you had a global pandemic in your business plan. I mean, you know, virtual show of hands. I think if you did, we should get you seconded onto Boris' team to manage the recovery, because you obviously have quite brilliant insight. I've been through several downturns and the ensuing recessions, each one possessing its own identifying factors. The last really significant downturn was, as you know, in 2008, following the international banking sector crisis. And as a leader, it's a real advantage to be able to learn from those past downturns from both an EQ and an IQ perspective, and not least the resilient quotient that's required. As a business leader in 2008, and I had a business then which had a specific focus in the wholesale and retail financial services market, the subprime crisis, followed quickly by the collapse of Lehman Brothers, anyone remember them? Brought about overnight a 65% drop in demand in my business. Whilst permanent job requirements were harder hit, to certainly each service proposition within the business, whether it be interim, temp, contract, RPO, MSP, were all significantly affected with arguably a recovery curve that took several years, along with an emergence into a financial services market that was irrevocably changed. And it's times like that that resilience becomes your best friend and certainly your best enabler. One of the key differences between today and 2008 is that there was no furlough scheme, or anything like it. So the tough decisions around the restructure of the business had to be made, and that included people and what the correct size of the business needed to be to service a diminished marketplace. One of the key similarities between then and now sits in the customer relationship space. Then, as now, the importance of depth in our connections and our trading partners is paramount, and it will dictate which businesses recover or not. Another key differential, of course, is the fact that absolutely everyone in the world is affected by this. 100% of the world's developed economies have or are experiencing lockdown. And as a quick aside here, and sorry, Natasha, I think it's kind of worthwhile, I think that you need to think as business leaders how you're really using that to your advantage in your business. All of your customers pretty much are working from home, and you and your teams are connecting with them via VC, whether that's Zoom or Teams or whatever. And it cannot be underestimated. This invitation into their home accelerates relationship development to the power of 11. How many Zooms have you been on where there's been a pet who's climbed onto the desk, or a defiant toddler or teenager for that matter looms into view? This level of intimacy is unprecedented, and I would urge you all to think about that and what the advantages can be for you, your teams, in terms of relationship development. And also, by the way, as an aside, conversion of phone calls to VC meets should absolutely be one of your key KPIs right now. How are we doing for questions, Natasha? Okay?
We're good, Tara, at the moment. Thank you.
So resilience and being a resilient leader. What is resilience? It's your capacity for change. It's what gives you the psychological strength to cope and adapt to change. So I think we can all agree it's a necessity and not a luxury right now. Indeed, whereas it used to be, and when I say used to be, I mean 5 months ago, a should have, it is now an absolutely critical must-have in your skill set. And whilst we're talking about the subject of resilient leadership, I'd like you to ponder on the following 2 questions. And please use the chat box to comment or answer for you and your business. And Natasha will be keeping an eye on those, and we'll flag any points for discussion or questions. So the first one is, in your career, when was the defining moment when you realized resilience was a must-have skill? For me, it most definitely was the financial crisis of 2008. The morning after the investment banks started to crumble and it became clear that my business was going to be impacted deeply, the need to step up and form a coherent plan certainly made me realize my resilience levels. And secondly, what would be the impact on your business or your team of a 20% increase in resilience? So I suspect the 20% acceleration into a change mindset would illustrate a significant improvement, both performance, well-being. But think about it, and plot the change. There is a spectrum of resilience, without a doubt, and it is strategic. And your current change programs and their success are dependent on your resilience. The developments within our working world and certainly within our clients' world are genuinely unprecedented. And this rapid development has brought about things that appeared to be months or even years away on a far horizon, galloping very, very quickly towards us. You won't have all the facts to make decisions. You don't have all the information you would normally expect to analyze before making decisions. This is change. And you will need to go to your values, make decisions, and lead authentically. Your team needs to know you have a plan. The resilience spectrum sits between a breakdown point where people are unable to function and they need psychological support. And those people often hide that very, very well. So your ability to recognize that will become honed, and it's absolutely something to look out for. I remember very well having someone in a team of mine who was clearly sitting at that point in the spectrum with a very up and down process between crisis points. And as a leader, you become very attuned to working out what the trigger points are and being able to identify them and act before they happen. The next point along the spectrum is the break-even point, which is where actually the majority of people sit. And this is where you are showing the beginnings of change capacity, a strong coping mechanism. And then we go through to a breakthrough point, which is where individuals are really resourceful, adaptable, energized, they can react to the unknown, take it in their stride. And it would be a really useful exercise to plot you and your teams against this spectrum. And for sure, there are steps in between those three stages, and that's absolutely fine to recognize as well, of course. As a resilient leader, you will want to build resilient teams, and you want to move people, and indeed hire people, along the spectrum. And some of the steps towards this, firstly, understand how to spot the different resilience levels across your teams. And that's another reason why the spectrum exercise is really useful. And I would absolutely recommend that you do that as part of any regular people review. Factor in these different team levels when you're initiating and driving change. Make sure the core principles of resilience are supported in your organisation. And they are psychological safety, so have an environment where people are listened to. Have agency, give people agency. People need to take responsibility for their own resilience, but they need to be given agency to do that. Well-being, learning, create a coaching culture, learning and development, and creating that space, one of the bedrocks to resilience. Focus on your leadership team and your first line managers as your key leverage points. Avoid toxic productivity. And some of you may have heard that term. And what I mean by that is that as leaders in a really fast-paced, really fast-moving and challenging marketplace, the balance between meaningful activity and self-care will become completely misaligned and nobody wins. And it can happen almost by accident. There is a really, and very often self-prescribed pressure to be available online 24/7 and to be doing constantly. So my advice here to avoid that toxic productivity is to develop some real non-negotiables in your day. So have a solid day structure, frequent short breaks, exercise, meditation, if that helps. Natasha, and you and I talked about this, and I'm sure you can really add here, certainly one of your areas of specialism, the diversity and inclusion, is so important when building resilience into a business.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of what you've said, Tara, really does resonate. And if you don't mind, I'll pick up on a couple of points just to draw them out a bit further. You talked about the deep connections and how key they are. And I think when I think about that, that's the ability to empathise, show care, build trust, and really understand individuals as humans, isn't it? And recognise the diversity of experience actually that people are going through at the moment, whether they're working in a flat with no garden or a house full of children, or even where they're, like you said, their mental state is at. But equally, those connections can be hugely helpful when building your own resilience, can't they? I mean, I know whenever you and I talk, I always come off the phone with a lot of energy, because the connection when we speak or with other people that I'm engaged with lifts me often, and when I come off the call or the conversation, I've perhaps got a renewed bit of energy that I didn't have beforehand. So those deep connections that you were talking about get formed through empathy and don't they? But they can give a lot back as well in terms of the energy and positive energy that you get from it. And I think about the point around psychological safety, as you talked about. And again, I think as a leader, it's really important that we're able to show humility, isn't it? Because our own humility creates some of that psychological safety for the people around us. And not being afraid, perhaps, to share where we're at on that spectrum. Yes. And how people understand that we are susceptible as leaders as much as they are, and how do we cope, and what are the mechanisms that we found to help us that if we shared with others may well help them. So yeah, I think you know, the final point I suppose on this that links back to the sort of diverse workforce concept is that as we come out of this as well, if you want a resilient team, you want a team that is made up of people that aren't all the same and are going to be able to weather the storm in different ways and contribute to the team weathering the storm through the fact that they bring something to the table that contributes to the whole. So it's really starting to acknowledge and understand, isn't it, what everyone on the team brings, and allowing them to use those skills or mindsets to help each other. And perhaps we don't always do that in the workplace because people just sit in a bit of a bucket and we just label them as, you know, with the job title that they've got, and that perhaps we don't allow them to draw out those other things in them that can help with some of these not role dependent requirements going forward. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what you've said so far.
And really good points. And as leaders, we don't have all the answers right now, and it's okay to fess up to that and show our vulnerabilities as long as we have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think having spent the last 25 years plus in leadership roles, combined with all of the conversations that I'm having with my clients right now, there is certainly building on resilience and as a resilient leader, that actions that should be part of our key planning now as we start to emerge from the crisis management phase of COVID into the very much strive and thrive parts of coming out of the curve. And certainly, you know, the points I'll go through are certainly ones that I've personally followed very closely following other downturns, and they're very, very, very relevant today. I think the first one is communication. And we talk a lot about that, and it can't be underestimated, both in terms of the content, transparency, and the volume. All of your teams have been working from home for a really long time now, many of them in isolation, and they need constant reminders that they're part of a team. And it's really important to be available to address concerns, which I'm sure you all are, being positive and importantly, being honest. I always tell my clients and my leadership team before that you can never over communicate something. When you think you've repeated something too often, repeat it again. If any voids of information exist in your business and they are allowed to remain, I can guarantee that they will be filled with rubbish. And this is a completely avoidable scenario if the communication flows are at the right level, the right volume, and have the right content. Focus everyone on the things they can control. I think there's way too much bombarding us at the moment across all media channels, and that can become really distracting to your plan. And we need to keep everyone focused on the things that they personally can control. Cash flow forecast weekly. I cannot underestimate that in today's world. You need to make sure you have a strong finance partner. And I'm afraid rip up your strategic plan, or at the very least interrogate it with rigor. Now is absolutely the opportunity to challenge the why in your business. Why do you do things the way that you do? Why do you work the markets that you do? What is your service proposition? What's excellent about what you do and you should do more of it? What not so much, and actually you should be doing less of it, if any? So that more of, less of, it's the same as sitting down and doing your pros and cons list for your personal motivators and your personal drivers. really think about that, really question everything. This is a fantastic opportunity. Are the market sectors that you're covering the right ones? Are the niches niche enough? There are opportunities out there, and you need to follow the money. Quite frankly, coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, it was clear that the new market would be a much more highly regulated one. And to that end, the opportunity for my business was really to focus on risk and regulatory, compliance arenas, all of which are taking a little bit of a backseat in the past, which would now come absolutely to the fore. And indeed, which was music to our ears, they all now had a mandated headcount, most of which investment banks were falling woefully behind that mandated headcount. And there will be opportunities like that in your market space today, but you've got to sniff them out and you've got to follow the money. Really develop and understand the right triggers to bringing people back into your business now. And it is a really pivotal time, isn't it? Because you're going to be making decisions about bringing people back over the next few weeks. And, you know, there are the changes in the furlough scheme will impact upon those decisions. And I've listened to some people talking about bringing people back, and it's really been based on anecdotal information. It feels busier. People are saying really good things. We think we should bring some people back. Avoid that where you can. Really monitor the data in your business and really fixate on the triggers that are data driven to bring people back. And that data could be around the trends in job flow, what the conversion rates are looking like. It could be around the onboarding of new clients, but there are a number of things that it could be, but make sure that you really have very quantifiable triggers that underpin those decisions about bringing people back. It's going to be so important, isn't it? We want to bring people back into a really solid business case so that they can thrive. And what's your plan? What's the plan is probably something that you will all have been asked frequently, and quite rightly. Your teams need to know that you can now navigate them through this turbulence. And it's really, you need a plan for the next 6, maybe 9 months. And then you need a plan for thereafter. And they're quite distinct, aren't they? And you need to create a vision around each of those timelines, because that's what your team are looking to you. As a leader, all they want you to do is create vision. We don't know all the answers, but we can create a vision. And I think that we talked a little bit in the intro on LinkedIn about personal brand, and social media can be really, really busy right now. I'm sure everyone's finding it's really, really busy, and you want to create and elevate your personal brand. And absolutely, being on social media is absolutely right, and you should absolutely continue to do that. But really think about what your chosen social media channels should be, and how you can adopt a niche approach to the community that you want to engage with. And that might look more like more direct marketing, more videos, more campaigns. And again, I would strongly urge you to have a very, very strong marketing partner, because I think that is an area that in recruitment we haven't always given the focus that it deserves. And it's really important that you do that. That is a really good talent to embrace in your business. You need that. You don't need to bring it necessarily in-house. You can outsource it, but you need a strong partner who's going to help you to plot the way to raise awareness of you and your personal and your corporate brand through the next 6 to 9 months. How are we doing for questions? I don't want to just...
I think I need to just nudge the audience, please.
Yeah.
Just start pushing your questions through before we run out of time with Tara. So please do send your questions through. I mean, Tara, maybe there's one that I've heard come up a few times, and it might be interesting if I could just ask you your thoughts on this. And it links back to your point around the triggers for bringing people back into work, which I think is pertinent and relevant. And I think I've observed in a number of cases that certain individuals within organisations that I've been engaged with have actually performed better not being in the office. And my observation is that they'll reach a bit of a point of challenge around, do I just mandate that everybody comes back to work because that's how it used to be? Or do I start now thinking about an alternative way to look at my workforce and really understanding it? I guess it comes back to the D&I piece as well, where we're recognising that we've had an opportunity for people to try a different way, and some people may well thrive under the new way. And short of the fact that clearly there are challenges around creating culture, creating and sharing the environment for common goals and learning and development. Mindful of that, do you feel that there is an opportunity now to perhaps think about a different way of managing the workforce physically forward?
I think absolutely without a doubt, Natasha, I haven't yet spoken to anyone in the sector who's not of that mindset. And I think there is a demographic divide here, and some companies I talk to who have a certain demographic, everyone is gagging to get back in the office, they cannot wait. And if you scratch the surface of that demographic, it will often be people who perhaps are sharing a 3-bed house with 6 other people, and they're working in their bedroom and they just want to get out of the house. And then other companies who people are thinking, well, actually, I really like this. It works. I can't see myself going back into the office ever again. And of course, ultimately, what we want is a really good blended offering that will suit all of these different types of people. Again, in terms of inclusion, as a business leader seeking to grow a business, you want to hire the best people, and those best people will have all of those different mindsets. Some will want to work at home for 5 days a week and come into the office once a month for a management meeting or some such thing, and some will want to work for 3 days and come in 3 days from home, and come in for 2 days, and others will have no interest in ever working from home. So I think having a blended model is going to be really key to success, because we've all, in the main, had 12 weeks plus now of working from home. And it's going to be very difficult as a business leader to argue, well, actually, that doesn't work then. So no, you have to all come back into the office, because we've all been operating like that for a significant period of time. So that argument is just, boxed off. So as business leaders, it does work. It can work better in some instances. It won't work for everybody in other instances. So having that blended model. And interestingly, I had this week on Monday, my first meeting actually in an office. It was a very COVID-friendly office, and all of the work had been done rigorously to make sure the environment was the right one for people coming back into work. And then there was a heavily diluted number of people in that office from what they normally would be. But it was absolutely wonderful to have that ability to change my working environment and going back into that office and having not just the change of scene, but there is undoubtedly a different dynamic that comes with traveling somewhere. And that was a really positive experience, and I think that's being replicated across the sector. I've talked to many business owners in the sector who are now starting to bring people back. They're all, doing a survey is a great idea. Understand what your teams want. There's no point in us sitting thinking, well, this is what people are going to want. Survey everybody and actually find out what it is that they want to do and how they see their work-life balance progressing now they've experienced this working from home option. How they're going to drive it forward, how do they want to own that, and use that information in your planning. in your planning process, because it will probably surprise you. It will probably surprise you. So use it, do the survey, use it, and factor it into your planning process. But I think it's a really positive thing that we will emerge from this crisis with many more acceptable working models, whether they be flexible, remote, office bound. They will be blended and they will be different, and that's a good thing, and that's a really good thing. And as an employer, as a recruiting business owner or leader, having those embedded into your business will of course make you more attractive. And what's not to like about that?
Yeah, I agree, Tara. Thank you for confirming that. We've had a question from Didi Doak. She asks you've mentioned 6 to 9 months as a period of recovery. Do you have a view about different phases that businesses will encounter during this 6 to 9 month timing? And can you identify the source of the spectrum for resilience and where we might get more information on that, please, Tara?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, I think that if I had a crystal ball, and if I was an economist, I could be more qualified about my statements. But I think that bringing together all of the strands of information that we see, the trends that I'm seeing in my clients, and what they have measured over the last 10 weeks and can see emerging as really strong trends, will all feed into that 6 to 9 month trajectory plan. And I would certainly urge people to have a specific plan for 6 to 9 months, because it will at least take that long to see a greater sense of normality coming back into our worlds. Some markets will beat that, and some won't. But I think it's a reasonable amount of time, and in past experience, it's certainly that we come out of crisis and we're looking to move into a striving phase. That 6 to 9 months is always a credible time frame to measure by. And I think on resilience, I mean, goodness, there are many fonts of information around the resilience spectrum. I think I would recommend the Resilience Engine. If you look, DD, onto the Resilience Engine, there is a research group which has been researching for many years, and have some really good intel and further insight onto that spectrum of resilience. So as a font of knowledge and for further reading, absolutely I would direct you towards the Resilience Engine.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. So we've talked about lots of things. We posed a couple of questions. I mean, all these topics that we've talked about are huge, aren't they? And I'm really only touching on them. And I would be, delighted to continue the conversation. Do connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already, so we can continue the conversation. But if anyone is prepared to put their virtual hand up and contribute to the questions we asked at the beginning, or indeed perhaps you, Natasha, about recognising that point in your professional life when you really recognise that resilience was key.
Yeah, and we have got one more question as well, so I'll ask that of you in a moment. It might be quite a nice one to close on, actually, Tara. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you realise you have to be resilient at so many different points in your life, and I mean, I'm sure we all start to build that as we're young and as we work through, our school world. But in terms of my recruitment world, I think it was slightly different for me. I remember starting in recruitment in the early 90s, and things went well for quite a long time before I had to sort of face a market downturn. But actually, I recall for me the time where I really had to dig deep and where I just felt like the whole world was against me was when I had some disruption, I guess, within my workforce, and where that cohesion of the team really got threatened by one or two individuals that weren't buying into the values and weren't buying into the team, and where it felt to me like they were just going to take the entire business down. And having to deal then with, again, something that sort of felt out of my control, but I guess at least at that time I had the option to be bold and strong in myself in terms of my reaction it and tackle it and deal with it. And unfortunately, that's what we can't do today, because none of us have the ability to individually impact what's going on around us. But that was certainly where I felt that you know, I really did feel like my business was just being threatened incredibly by a number of disruptive individuals that just were not sharing the common goal and the common set of values. And I think that taught me then at that point that, you know, I could stand my ground, I could overcome, and it builds you, you know, that builds you for the future, doesn't it? And the more you go through situations that test you in that way, the stronger you become, don't you? And I think at the moment, you said it earlier as well, Tara, I mean, I think the fact we have to draw at the moment from the fact this is not an isolated issue that any one of us is singularly experiencing on our own. And I think sometimes it's helpful when you remind yourself of that. Sorry, I think we've got another question coming in. Louise Toff says hello to you, Tara.
Hi, Louise. I've worked with Louise for a long time. One of the best HR participants in our space.
Good. Let me just check where we've got coming in. Louise is saying how the toxic productivity really resonated with her, and asking if there's any tips you've got on how you manage that.
I think that it is about structure. I think you've got to be really disciplined in having your work time and your home time. Working from home, they so easily can bleed into each other. You know, and I certainly in my own home environment have been reprimanded frequently for my constant looking at emails when I should be actually somewhere else in my head. So I'm very aware of that, and I think having those, you know, having some non-negotiables, those hard stops that you really adhere to and remain adhered to, and make that commitment to yourself to continue to adhere to. And they can be very simple. You know, I'm going to start my day at this point, I'm going to finish at that point, and I'm going to have frequent breaks, and that might just be to go and walk around the garden if you're lucky enough to have a garden, or to walk down the road, or to go and get the paper, or to do something, but frequent and short work for me. And I think, you know, having a hard stop for when the end of your day is, and fixing to that, and planning your evenings as well, so that you've got something that you're really looking forward to, that you know everyone is anticipating, and it has a start time. So you need to you need to work onto that. And Louise, I know you know you're a mother as well, aren't you? You've got a young child, and I think that gives you another set of challenges to deal with. So structuring and time planning and having a daily plan is what works for me. It's paramount. And how you deal with managing your free time when we have so limited options, I think that we have whatever works for you. Whether it's I decided going into the lockdown because I would have more time, just not commuting anywhere. My clients are all over the UK, and not having any travel time brought me back a lot of hours, and so I made the decision to spend some time in education, which is a luxury. When do we get the opportunity to do that? I've operated as an executive coach for some time, and I wanted to further my learning around that space and move towards more accreditation in that space. So I've done that. So I've been working online to achieve that. So it is that balance and getting that alignment right between, you can keep working, because of course we all can, there's always something to do, or you can have that demarcation between the things that you kind of want to achieve in those different buckets of time. So you've got your work, for me it was that education piece, and then you've got your home and everything to do with that. So managing it really is a very personal thing, but for me that's what's worked. So having something to fill the time that I've gained back, and that's not just doing more of the same, it's doing something different, and something that's going to be rewarding, and something I love, and something that's going to give me something coming out the other end. And the day planning, I can't underestimate quite simply the day planning.
I think there's something, Tara, if you wouldn't mind, that I'd add to that as well. And I think you've explained really nicely how we look after ourselves in this, but one thing that I know I've certainly experienced, and I'm sure other people will, is how we can almost put that toxic productivity onto other people if we're not careful.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think for us as leaders to be mindful of is and hopefully actually if we follow some of your advice we won't be doing this, but there is sometimes a tendency, isn't there, if you're sending emails late at night, you might be sending an email, if you haven't put your structure in place, at 10 o'clock at night, and the person you're sending it to is then perhaps thinking, oh my goodness, do I have to now respond and prove that I've been up at night working at 10 o'clock as well? Or as you say, you know, you kind of, I think there's a worry when you work from home that you have to prove that you're constantly online and that your productivity is high and that you're working just as hard if you're in the office. And leaders, it's really important, I think, that we, the structure you talked about, we encourage our teams to undertake so that collectively between us, we're not putting that toxic productivity onto each other as much as we're not onto ourselves. That's something that I think would be a good takeaway, because then we build that resilience within our teams, don't we? And
no, it's a very good point. And almost, you know, I'd almost recommend and advocate having two phones. So you've got one for work, one that's not work, and then you can manage your time more effectively because you could physically put something down and walk away, which has an impact.
So Louise says thank you. Right, I think we had one last question actually, Tara, that might be quite nice to end on, which was, how do you deal with the emotional side of what is going on? So you shared with us some of your techniques around structure and education. Is there anything else you do to deal with the emotional side for yourself?
I think a lot of it is also about, you know, planning your time. So I think, you know, your emotional side will never thrive and flourish if you aren't managing your time effectively. And again, it comes back to the, you know, the working from home scenario where it's easy to work for 12 hours a day if you want to, and that's not good for your emotional side. That will, you know, that anomaly between you know, the EQ and IQ and how you're utilizing that in your life will completely be misaligned. So I think, you know, certainly managing time really effectively. And I think, you know, I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and as a parent, you manage your, you know, they almost manage your emotional side for you. You know, the luxury of having a personal emotional side really kind of perhaps might not be there so much. It's really dealing with other people and the emotions that they're going through and supporting them through a process. You know, at the moment, life going into the lockdown life was very overwhelming, and certainly for a 16-year-old, and supporting them through and navigating the way through for her with her helped me enormously, because it diverted my attention, certainly for sure. But I think you know, the giving and the nurturing played to my values, and that helped me emotionally overall as well. But it's a huge subject, isn't it? And
it's different for everyone too, isn't it? Certainly for me, leaving the house and getting outside, and whether it's raining or sunshine, the fresh air and connecting with the outdoors is hugely important to me. So I suppose part of the knack is knowing what works for you, isn't it? And no one else can really tell you except yourself. So it's about perhaps thinking back to your experiences around, when do you feel contentment? When if you shut your eyes and you're in a boring meeting, where do you picture yourself being, or what are you doing? And can you do those things today with the constraints that are around us? But it's certainly very personal, isn't it? And I guess that comes again back to how this whole experience has shone a light on the fact we're all humans.
We are, I mean, I heard a really nice phrase recently where someone said, when you engage with your teams, remember that we're human beings as well as human doings, and we check in often with our teams to find out how work is progressing, but actually what we need to do is be checking with people as to how they are doing as human beings. And, you know, some people will have different personal situations going on in the background. And I think as leaders, it's really important to be aware of that and to know that and be able to check in on people for that purpose.
Thank you. And Dee Dee's given us one last one, actually. So Dee Dee, thank you very much for engaging with us on the questions. How did you manage, and I think she's perhaps asking that to I think that's coming to me, Dee Dee, but because I think Tara's given us a fair bit on it at the moment. So I'll answer it, and then maybe Tara, if you think there's anything else to add. But how did you manage your sanity and your resilience in dealing with the disruptive elements at work? You know, I think I might have just touched on it. For me, it's been trying to maintain my feeling of purpose. And I think, Tara, you mentioned this actually earlier as well. It's a bit like the why, isn't it? So trying to maintain some sense of why. And it could have been so easy just to give in, I guess, many times. And for me, you know, my challenge has been a number of my clients have taken, you know, they've reduced the amount of external support that they've had over this period of time. And like you, I've had to think, well, how do I keep myself educated and grow my own mindset? So when I do return back to working with some of the people that have kind of taken a bit of a break, I go back a better person than the one they had before. And where I developed on that journey. So like you, I've chosen that piece around self-development. I've chosen to make sure I get out every day and go running and do the physical side of things that I love doing. And actually, I think, again, to relate back to some things you've talked about, for me, it has just been keep connected, keep feeling you're part of something. You said that earlier, Tara. It's really important for us as humans to feel part of something. And actually, women in recruitment have done a really fantastic job, Joe and Josie, and actually keeping this network connected. And that's been a great way. And I think for all of us, feeling part of a community, part of a team of people experiencing common things, sharing knowledge, experience, those are all fabulous ways of maintaining some sense of purpose and belonging, which I think as humans we all need. Have you missed anything in your conversation with us, Tara, that you'd add to that?
No, I think I'd endorse all of that, Natasha. I think education is a wonderful thing. You know, if you are inclined to thrive in a culture of learning, being able to have a small time now to tap into that, whether it's reading, you know, developing a new subject area, and enhancing some piece of education that you went through previously, as I've done on the coaching side. They're really good ways of dealing with managing your time, making sure you remain sane, and certainly feeding into resilience. They absolutely do, to make you forget about all of the disruptive stuff that's going on and will continue to go on, that puts you on an even keel and you know, more closely aligns you to your own internal values.
Yeah. So thank you, Tara.
Thank you. I've been delighted. Lovely to see you, and well done for keeping the community going. It's a great one.
Thank you. Well, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with the audience. I'm sure you've given them a lot to take away. And like I said earlier, it's just fantastic that we all support each other and come together to share our experiences. And thank you for being such a great role model to the industry as well. Next week, we've got Katie Needs talking. She's an ambassador for trans awareness and highly regarded as an expert for the BBC and ITV. So maybe, Tara, you might like to join us for that one.
I definitely. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And an area I think we probably all need more education standing around. So I hope you and everyone else today can join us. So have a lovely weekend, everybody. Keep safe, and we'll see you next. Thank you again, Tara.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.